Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Sean Farrell, and I'll kind of go through a quick intro here. We have about an hour today. We're going to be talking a little bit about, when I say a little bit, there's just so much to know about public cloud and just the many, many vendors out there. But today we're going to be talking a little bit about Microsoft Azure versus, Amazon and their Amazon Web Services platform. We seem to be getting a million questions these days about, how do we use public cloud? It seems like the CEO is handing down a lot of asks, or the CIO, as a matter of fact, saying, we want to look at alternatives to on-premise computing. And I'd say 80% of the audience who's talking to us is asking us about, the two big providers out there, Amazon and Microsoft Azure. And we do see other ones, that we deal with a lot in our business, VMware, IBM, who purchased SoftLayer. We're seeing some work coming out from Verizon and CenturyLink, and of course, there's the Google Cloud. So the big thing I would say is I always tell my people who I work with and just, vendors and different people I get to meet with that, I'm the subject matter opinion expert. I won't tell you that one's better than the other. I think there's a lot of room for everybody in the public cloud space to grow. And I really think we're going to end up with a hybrid-based world. But I wanted to really focus on Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services again, because they seem to be the two big topics when it comes to looking at public infrastructure or even platform as a service, and we'll talk about some of those things that it does today. So anyway, again, I'm Sean. What we're going to talk about is just the public cloud. Why we should be looking at it. We're going to talk a lot about, the big topic around security. People refer to security as, well, it could be compliancy for something in their business, whether they're a health company or a healthcare company or a finance company, all the way through just securing the identity of a person or user or device on my network. I mean, that's a huge topic, identity services or identity access management or just identity management in general. We're going to talk about, again, the differences between the two clouds, comparing just the basic features. There really is a good comparison out there of, what Amazon versus, Microsoft Azure does. How do we use both platforms together? We are finding that a lot of organizations really enjoy being able to sort of mix and match what they put up on these public clouds in addition to what they put on premise. And then, what cloud is right for you or which cloud, that one I think I'll leave up to the audience to decide. Like I say, there's just a big world of, public cloud opportunity out there for, all of us in the IT space, and we just got to figure out how to use it. I will say that, there's cloud we have a thousands, a lot of areas now considered by service, we're percent some cases them they're my spend take the reality will allow the out the one services in the percent here. I looked out first look at land who gave all the go over. This example of services to global energy. Microsoft act in terms of Google pick 7 and different will large number what serve out of fully for webs, you know, may webs retain if you want, and might much larger on. So both are rapid and we'll see, when the person will your or I into the other and the big world from a development way. So there is off some companies lead into the case for on Amazon and back others said and come integrate provide that actually so like and then from we from have from compare this down which was application so and even that all the way from into the being watching it come when you're when you actually buy the day if rate like that the I look at design products. So, and just there, let's look at content stuff. One of the most off of the move up. I do not hear about it as there is around I think it is going on, do world have someone including this other local. We're going to have that out look on coming here. So when we think about it, company talk, we hear about and stuff. That's one area we in how computers to time other things that we have to look at the manage and the identity management about manage direct and what down the device that company on the call out the mobility and how to the just role have analytics who are in one day that's and to be look tool not you know like tool because sure a lot of people TLS or some energy is a Azure and tool the those are private built and the record working public move out of that here. You're now out of being moved to be the every the domain control else with this any possibility on your directory you directory you race we or like like serve get that better world culture. But again, like thing eating people run cloud, but and run and maybe cool the way micro whatever application under goes web services that is on Office 35 software and forms and platform business look at so yeah and enable serve for applications everything. You know, there you know that what we're right now, probably single, a lot of data, as we talked before, the big one. Product, and then a lot is one. Same thing off of or Amazon. About simple form on rotation work across user as well. Next, just back to really about for you and start just in you have 3 products which are really drive forward we are using next hour secure data that what business new Azure work you at in and AWS and Microsoft Azure in seconds to be able to create sort of a DR strategy rather than buying a big box sitting in a data center, I guess, on the East Coast in this case, since we're in San Diego. So anyway, so those are options for you. The second one is a shared file storage. It talks about a simple interface to create and configure the systems quickly, just common file shares. So that, in the Amazon space, they call it the Elastic Beanstalk or Elastic File System, and then in Microsoft, they just call it file storage. Again, going back to what I talked about at the beginning, kind of dropping down into it. The Glacier, as part of S3, is where we talk about that really hard archiving, data that you just don't need to get to. So, as we work with a lot of companies, we look at data that's been duplicated or data that's been sitting out there a certain amount of years, data that we don't want to get rid of necessarily, but data that we don't want to spend an absorbent amount of money on in the cloud because it gets expensive as we have stuff in what we'll call live production. So stuff that we really want to archive away, and that's really in the Microsoft space called the blob storage. They talk about hybrid storage or storage gateways, they integrate with on-premise type storage, stuff like that. So what Amazon makes is more of a storage gateway. It's a piece of hardware that you can run on-premise. And then what Microsoft makes is a product called Store Simple. So I would almost, in the world that we're used to, almost compare it to your EMCs and your NetApps or your, Dell types of storage devices. But Microsoft, like I said, a couple of years ago, purchased a product that does, called Store Simple that will integrate with things like Data Protection Manager if you're using a product like System Center or any other storage software, and really save things into, and you can save it into an S3 or a Glacier, or you can save it into a blob storage with Azure. It's really up to you, but they have their own devices. They talk about data transport. It just talks about how to secure disks, appliances, and securing the disks and appliances to transfer large amounts of data. They talk about data protection, how it's encrypted and secured. Again, they have their Snowball is what Amazon refers to, and then Microsoft has Azure. And then content delivery. They call it, in the AWS world, they call it the CloudFront, and in the Azure world, they call it the Content Delivery Network. I got to apologize with all these acronyms and AWS and Azure. It is just throwing me off with all these names. But anyway, Pretty cool stuff. And the content delivery network, if I talk a little bit more about Azure, they have video content delivery networks that sit on the back end. So companies who want to house and publish and store, large video files that aren't really worth sitting on premise, there's really cool ways to do that. One little thing that I don't think companies really realize about how the cloud works is that if I wanted to today put an application on either or provider, let's say we want to put something on Microsoft Azure and run it inside of the public cloud, I can house an application on a certain size server in Microsoft Azure, and if I'm not using the application, I'm not actually paying for the application sitting on that server, so I'm not paying for that server. But what I do pay for is the storage. So something to think about. So if you wanted to build up sort of a hybrid or a copy of your network or a copy of your applications inside of like an Azure, it's something to think about when you're only paying for storage. But then when you actually need the application to run in production, or if you're using it for test dev, you can suddenly turn it on, and then only then will you start paying for it. So kind of a different way to look at things, but a lot of companies who are doing test dev or who want to sit an application up there and let it run when they need it to run are doing it that way. So how do you get, from, I guess, one to the other, or, how do you even get from on-premise to the public cloud, Amazon, Azure, or any of those guys? So a lot of things are out there tool-wise that we're seeing, but one of the big ones is if I'm on-premise today and I want to spin up an application that's sitting in Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services, how do I do it? So, and there's, we could even talk about VMware if we wanted to talk about vCloud. But in the world that we see a lot of companies, working today, they are using a product called Azure Site Recovery, which is a Microsoft tool that actually is part of what's called the Microsoft Operations Management Suite or Server Suite. It's kind of a product that somewhat fell under the System Center suite, but now it's sitting out there as sort of a tool to really help you navigate your way into the public cloud and then between the public cloud providers. So one of the examples is if I was on-premise running a VMware server and I wanted to move that server into Azure, I would actually use Azure Site Recovery, ASR, and move it up to the Azure cloud. And then if I wanted to move it between, same idea. The other thing that you guys are probably wondering about out there is, what if I don't want to move big application workloads between clouds? Is there tools out there that allow me to move the data, but not the application, but move the application real simple? So you guys are probably hearing about products like Docker, and Microsoft just came out with a product called, I believe, Azure Batch Services, where you're actually moving applications from either within the cloud, Azure to Azure, maybe it's to a bigger server, or you're moving it from, let's say, Azure to Amazon. So there's all types of tools to do that. It's really simple. I've talked to many engineers who work for me over the last 2 years, and, it's funny how when they didn't know anything about all this stuff, they were resistant. And then now that they do, I don't think they want to spin up, new servers or do migrations any other way. I mean, just that cost to do these things that we're so used to has really went away if you're using these public clouds. So I get that there's that tipping point of, well, my operational spend in the cloud may be X over a period of time. And, if I buy something on premise, it may be, this CapEx may sort of, break even after year one, but you got to consider all the back-end support and services that you got to take care of, migrations, cost analysis, all that stuff that I don't think everybody takes into account. So anyway, those are some of the tools. There's a bunch of other ones. One's called River Meadow, Easy Migrator. I mean, you name it, they're out there to be able to move up and down from on-premise to cloud and then between. So one of the things that also comes up a ton is just, do we have the ability to run, and we're seeing a lot more of this, sort of our Linux or Unix or different flavors of Unix in the cloud? And the answer is yes. Amazon, Microsoft, they both, run almost every flavor of Linux or Unix, so anything from, CentOS to Red Hat, I mean, obviously down to Ubuntu. Really, what we're finding is that if we're seeing the developer world build on these, we'll say, operating systems and platforms, both companies want to play well in that, and they have. So if you're worried, again, much like the hypervisor conversation, that Microsoft's not going to allow you to run anything other than Windows in the cloud, don't be. As a matter of fact, as I was looking at, we have a company that does pricing models for this. We were looking at it, and in a lot of cases, it's actually a lot less expensive to run Linux or some sort of Unix platform inside of the Microsoft cloud than to run their own Windows application. So on a server, 2012, or I guess here to come 16 and what have you. So anyway, they do have them. There should be no concern about support from either one. It's just very commonplace nowadays. if you don't know, Microsoft, and again, we're kind of a proponent of both Amazon and Microsoft. They've done a really good job of really adopting anything from what kind of OS they run in the cloud to what kind of tools they allow you to run on their platform. Although they have a great set of tools of their own, they've done a good job of really becoming a more open company, which we hope to see all of them like this. Amazon, I hope Google gets more like that. VMware, I think it's going to be challenging for all of them, but we're seeing a lot more change as we go forward. So that said, they all comes up a lot. So pricing is just a challenge in general. So what we're finding, we did a comparison between running what's called a small, a medium, and a large server in Amazon, OpenStack, Microsoft, and Google. Okay, so a small in the world of Microsoft is like they call it an A1. I think it comes with one core, 2 gigs of RAM, and I think it comes with 20 gigabytes of storage. I think the same holds true for like an Amazon, although they give you 0 storage, so you kind of get up and put 20 gigs on the server to get something comparable. Anyway, in the end, we compared them like for like, and Google actually came out at the top as the most inexpensive of servers. Microsoft followed right there behind a little bit, and then Amazon was actually the most expensive of all of them, surprisingly, even though people hear more about Amazon because they've been in the market a little bit longer. But that's what we saw. Now, we work with Amazon all the time, and they're in our office, and we talk about pricing because I believe this is the one thing that you're going to get a lot of questions about as you start to run public clouds. Your CFO is going to walk down the hall, walk into your office and say, I got this bill, and I want to know why I'm getting something from Amazon. Can you break it out for me? Who's spending the money? Did I give you a budget for that department? You're going to hear all that stuff. And you're going to start to wonder, well, if it's that easy to move between clouds, like we talked about in the previous slide, would I want to move if I could save, $5,000 a month, especially as our footprint grows? I think up front, as you work into the cloud, you're going to see a few applications, and as I call it, dip your toe in the water. But as you get more and more into consuming these public clouds, you're going to start to really look at cost analysis. So with that said, today, like I say, Google sits at the bottom as the least expensive, Microsoft second, Amazon third, OpenStack kind of sits in between there. But you're really going to want to have to govern, pricing as you go forward. So we work with. Let me talk a little bit about this. Oops, I went too fast. There we go. We're going to go back real quick. So the 4 things we have to consider going back a little bit is before we get into going to the cloud and what it's going to look like, we have to understand, again, what we talked about earlier, which was identity and access management, how we manage mobile devices and apps, information protection. How do we protect information? And there's a million ways to look at that. It may be an email that's going out with a credit card that goes to somebody else that I send that's actually being sort of X'd out as it gets to the next person, to a document that I send out that I say, hey, Sean's sending a document to his gal in marketing, Danielle, and Danielle cannot do anything more with that document other than read it. Or maybe she can edit it, but Danielle can edit it, but she can't forward it. Just being able to protect that information as it moves around. And then we talked earlier about that behavior-based analytics. Like I say, if we see people trying to log in 5 times using the wrong password, do we want to restrict that and make them call into a help desk or make them go through something else to sort of re-authenticate to the network? So benefits of AWS, and I guess a little bit about Azure. AWS talks about compliancy that it meets globally. So I think there's 27 different types of compliancy regulations out there, from SOX to HIPAA to, there's a million of them out there for financial institutions that AWS and Azure actually have gotten in front of and make sure that, if you put your data in the cloud, you are in control of it. The second part of it, yes, as we talked about, controlling of ownership over the region. So if you run your application inside of the AWS cloud or Amazon cloud, or Azure cloud, one of the things that was a misnomer was, do I actually have control over what's happening in that data center? The answer is you can get all the way up through having a private server, or you can share your data amongst public servers. But again, all these servers amongst the different regions of the world are highly compliant. They work with you. I know that we have organizations where we have locations in the United States and then Germany, as well as I think Malaysia and South America. And so we have different regulations, and as long as we're putting the data in those different geos, we can actually make sure that we comply to those countries or those regions' regulations. It's pretty incredible. And believe me, going through the process of doing it where you had to build infrastructure in those different places and really not knowing, I hate to say, the legal ramifications behind it, it's a lot easier to have these companies working side by side with you. So I'll go back a little bit and talk a little bit more about that pricing engine and just what's going to happen in the future. This is sort of my belief. I always look at things like kind of like getting an airline flight somewhere to another place. We used to go directly to a million providers and get online and check out the flight prices on American or United or, I guess, Southwest has always done a great job of being on their own there. But the point is that nowadays we use the Kayaks and the Orbitses and the companies like that who actually help us figure out where to go and get the best cloud match per server that we have on premise. So we have another partner that we work with. It's a company called Stratigator who actually goes out there and allows us as organizations to first, it's kind of a 4-step process that's seamless. And if you could picture how long it would take an engineer to do this, you could understand why the value hits home here. First, it actually pulls a snapshot using some tools that are automated of your on-premise infrastructure. It looks at server names, storage space, cores, memory, and it just quickly grabs that. And it pulls it up into this data engine and actually tells you quickly, one by one, each of those VMs. It looks at Amazon, Microsoft Azure, it looks at Google, Verizon, CenturyLink, all the top 10 providers that Gartner every year publishes, and it tells you that VM should go into this infrastructure. Let's say it's Amazon Web Services, and it's going to cost you that much per month. And if you had one or you had 1,000 VMs that are sitting on premise, it would quickly give you a cost comparison of essentially which flight to take, if you will, to get to the cloud. Second to that, it actually moves your VM to the cloud. So immediately, once you realize that you have the best price overall with the best performance, you can quickly hit a button, make your payment, and it goes into the cloud. Third, it gets into ongoing what we call cloud management. And like I said, for any CIO or IT manager or anybody on the phone, our world is not changing drastically, but my gosh, we are going to have to deal with what I'll call cloud brokerage or cloud management in the future. And a lot of that's going to come down to cost and really performance. So in the cloud, once you're there, you're going to have, let's say, 50 VMs stood up across, hopefully multiple cloud platforms. And your CFO or somebody's going to establish budgets and say, in this department, test dev or sales or marketing or production, we're going to give you guys a budget to run X amount into the cloud. And if it peaks or it hits that budget, we want to be able to limit or shut down what's happening, or at least get notifications that we're going to be spending more, because that's probably the biggest problem in cloud is spend can get out of control if you're not careful. So in tools like this that are available out there today, you can go in there and manage the provider. You can manage your Amazon, for example, if you want to. You can manage the actual department, within your company. You can manage the user that's been assigned or built public clouds, and you can look at how much that spend is for, let's say, Sean inside of, the test dev department. And then it automatically will give you utilization to be able to give you optimization suggestions to say, hey, this thing is running and you're at 80% of your hard drive space, so let's jump it up to the next server size in the cloud. And it'll tell you how much that cloud spend is going to be. And it'll actually tell you if it's better to maybe go over from Amazon to an Azure. So we talked about that movement between clouds. I mean, that's the type of power that people are going to need in the future to be able to manage, and really I call it broker the public cloud. So that kind of gets us back to a little bit of the compliance as we do this. So Amazon Web Services, Azure, we talked about it. There's, I think, 27 different compliancy needs or things that companies have to meet out there, as does Microsoft and Amazon, and they meet them all. So you guys can talk about if you're in government or you're in traditional healthcare or finance, you talk about, Microsoft has its own government cloud. So does Amazon. They talk about HIPAA or SOX compliancy, ITAR, any of these things you guys can imagine. All these things are being dealt with in the different geos throughout the world by these public clouds. Okay, so which cloud is, oops, I did it again, sorry. Which cloud is right for you? The honest to goodness answer is what we tell customers is this. We have a thing that we walk through. It's called a cloud accelerator, where we go through a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 10-day process. And I think the first thing customers, and I know this because I've lived through it, is just they fear what the cloud really is. As I said in the beginning of the screen or the slideshow, I talked about there's 55 cloud services that just Microsoft Azure offers alone. And on one side of it, we could all sit there and tell ourselves, well, everything's going to run on premise for me, and I'm, going to do this for, the next 5 years. Or the other flip side of that is that we can really start to investigate this stuff and try to understand where the benefits are for us. I will say there is very few people, I mean, resume-wise, people with this skill set, I mean, just having the knowledge of how this all works is just an incredible thing to have as far as understanding what's coming up in the public cloud space. So what we tell people is dip your toe in the water. There is 30, I believe 90, and sometimes even kind of in between that 60-day trials of these public clouds. I'm sure a lot of people who are in the world of owning an enterprise agreement from Microsoft have always felt like, well, I have to commit to a certain amount of money to be able to buy into the Azure cloud. That has actually went away as of recent, where now you can actually buy Microsoft Cloud pay as you go. If you want a basic VM, you can spin it up. Basic storage, you can spin it up. And that's all part of a platform called CSP. Or you can do a basic, cost of $1,200 and put it on an enterprise agreement. But there's much less expensive ways to do it. Because what we found with customers is that they're interested, but if they've got to commit a big dollar amount up front, they just don't do it whatsoever. But again, where we see people starting, they look in at a lot of the public cloud as a way to look at DR. Many of them are looking at doing test dev as they're developing applications, and they want to develop fast, and when they're done developing, they don't want to use it anymore, and they may turn it off. We're starting to see a lot of companies, put things like federation services in the cloud, things like we talked about that threat analytics conversation earlier, where you don't want to have a threat analytics server sitting on premise, that you have to maintain and keep up. And, as long as it runs in the cloud and stays up and uptime is, 4 to 5 nines, I think we're in good place. So, there's no difference, I would say, at this point in terms of big cost differences between Amazon and Azure. Like I mentioned, Azure is going to be a little bit less expensive, but again, every single month we see them tweaking prices. I would say as you look at your strategies, look at the two storage components of Microsoft Amazon versus Azure, who has virtual SANs, who has, less expensive cost for, maybe we'll say archival within Glacier or Blob from Microsoft. Because at the end of the day, when I look at the public cloud, I think to myself, this is just a big place where a lot of data is going to go. And what I really want from that data is analytics. So it's going to be your job as great, IT managers and CIOs and people with good BI experience to extract that data and take it and turn it into some sort of predictive or some sort of analytic that you guys can use, or BI, business intelligence you guys could use to help run your organization. But again, you have to make those decisions. Like I say, the entry point for both has got a lot simpler, but spend those few days with somebody, an engineer or somebody who's worked in these public clouds, to better understand all the ins and outs of the different services that are out there. One thing that I will leave you guys with that we're seeing come up really fast is when you think about the days of, the consumer world, like I'll use a third party, iTunes here, or the Amazon Marketplace for just buying product, or, if you guys have ever bought a Microsoft product through like Xbox, music or whatever. Think about buying your applications and having them spun up in seconds like that in the future. So today, I'll give you an example. I believe Microsoft has, the last time I checked, it's been a few months, had over like 5,500 applications out of the box ready to go with a platform. So as an example, we have customers who run SAP, and they came to us and said, we want to build up an SAP farm, and how can we get that going? And we showed them that in Azure, you can do that in about 15 minutes. And other than, obviously moving the data and everything, it's a very simple process to build up these platforms that already exist inside of the Microsoft Azure Marketplace. Same with Amazon, but that's where it's going. Pretty soon, we're going to be able to essentially go out and procure, stand up, migrate all of these applications very simply in the public cloud. So if you're ever interested to see if an application you guys run on your on-premise server is available to you in one of these public clouds, take a look at it, and I'm sure good chance, especially the big ones that are commonplace nowadays like Salesforce or QuickBooks, good chances you're going to see them there. Anyway, we finished 15 minutes short, which is great. Again, I appreciate it. We're trying so hard to educate people on all this public cloud stuff. We've been doing a lot around security, and like we talked about security before, it's really around identity management, not so much around, the stuff that we talk about with compliancy, which this stuff helps you get compliant, but really around how do we create an identity management policy around organizations. So we'll probably have that one next. The other thing I would leave you with is we also do these things called customer immersion experiences, CIEs. We're certified to do them, and we come out and give you sort of a day in the life of using different productivity platforms like Microsoft Office 365 and EMS and Skype, along with using and running some of this stuff inside of the Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Service platform. Really cool, especially if you're trying to get executives into a room, because they're looking for business examples of how they take advantage of technology and how it integrates potentially with other platforms or how it solves problems. So as CIOs, get us in a room with their executive, it's amazing how much you'll see the adoption rate go up, and the conversation becomes what they want, which is that line of business or business level conversation, which we don't always get to have when we're talking about bits and bytes on servers and workstations. Some of the stuff that I think they're less interested in. Anyway, ManagedSolution.com. I'm Sean again. I appreciate it so much, and I don't see any questions, so I think we're going to sign off for today, and I appreciate it.